Hello and welcome to this tutorial brought to you by the Lewis Art. My name is Emmanuel Okafo and I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. This tutorial will be quite useful for users that are trying to get started with modeling inside Blender. Not necessarily if this is your first time opening Blender, you might not understand some aspects. So you might want to check out other tutorials that really assist you with really getting familiar with the interface. But in this tutorial, we'll just be getting started with modeling and using all the modeling tools to create a very advanced looking sword. So with this process, we'll be going from modeling, texturing, sculpting some high details, up to rendering out the sword. And by the end of this tutorial, the final result will be available for download. The link will be in the description so you can get it once it's done. So let's get started. So first of all, we'll start up setting up the reference. So depending on the asset which you're trying to create, you might want to keep it on a second window or use some applications like PureRef that allows you to set up your reference. But in this case, since we're trying to go for more precise modeling, it's advised to use reference right in the 3D viewport. So in Blender, the way you do that is you place your cursor in the 3D origin, and if you hit Shift A, you can go ahead and add your image reference. So if you go to image, you can see reference here. So we'll just select that, and I'm going to go where I have that saved, and this is it. So currently it's not positioned where I want, so I'm going to import it again. And okay, so this is our reference which we'll be working from. You have some parameters to play with to adjust the look of the image reference. So you could play with the opacity in case it's too bright. You play with the size, so you can also scale it up here. You could offset it. So I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees on the Z axis, on the Y axis. Okay, perfect. So this is what we have so far for our reference, and we can start modeling. I'm also going to position this right in the middle of the 3D viewport, and let's do that. So I'm just going to move this till I have it roughly aligned in the center of the viewport, so I can adjust the X location slightly, and once I have it there, we can keep moving. So to add objects in Blender, you can hit Shift A to bring up this menu, or you could go here to add your objects. So I'm going to just use this to add a simple plane. So what we'll be trying to model first is the blade. And with an asset like this, as you can see in the blade design, you have this nice flow. If I can just draw. So you have this kind of nice flow of the sword, and we also have some indentations. So what is important that we bear in mind in this particular process is the topology. We'll be modeling to kind of fit or cater to that topology. So for that, let's jump into edit mode, which you could switch through here. And I'm going to just scale this down and put it here so we can start modeling. So before we move on, I'm going to add the Symmetry Modifier. This allows you to just work on one half, and then everything you've modeled will be transferred to the other half. Okay, and so since we added the plane in the 3D viewport, we can see that it's mirrored nicely. But in case you don't have it mirrored nicely, one quick way you can fix that, if in case you don't have any object in the scene, you can just quickly add an empty and place it in the center of the scene. And a quick way to add an empty to the center of the scene is to hit Shift C. It's going to put the cursor right in the center of the scene, as you can see, and then we can add an empty. And now if we select this plane, and for the mirror object we set it to the empty one, which is this one, you can see it's going to also line up in the scene, and if we move this, it's going to move accordingly. So I'm just going to delete that for now, and let's keep modeling. So you can switch between different selection methods. So the first one is the vertices. It allows you to select points, Next you have edges. It allows you to select edges. And finally we have the face, which allows you to select the face. So they are basically they are basic modeling tools that you will definitely need, which is the extrude, which we're going to use right now. So we're just going to extrude this edge. So for more precision, I'm going to bring up the move tool. So you can just extrude this downwards by hitting E. So I'm just going to scale it to kind of roughly align with the reference. So I'm going to scale this. So the reason I'm doing this is so that topology looks nice and works. So right now I'm trying to connect this to point and it's not connecting. I just need to click on clipping and it's going to connect that. So now I can just connect those two, and yeah. So I'm going to move this up slightly to just line up with the image reference, and we can keep modeling. So I'm going to extrude here to match. Also extrude one more. Okay. And also gonna extrude this upwards and then extrude this outwards to match the image reference. So we are doing good so far. So let's close this hole. So to do that, we can just quickly, so if you select one point and you hit F, then that's going to create a face for you. So that's what we're going to do to just quickly close this out. And this we can select 1, 2, 3, 4 and hit F to fill it up. So we have our base for the sword and we can keep going. So now we're going to model the spot. So for that, let's extrude this upwards. Probably need to scale it down a bit here. And extrude some more. Okay, so at this point I'm going to add an extra loop. Also, I'm going to enable the edit mode preview. So as you can see, we can see the mirror except we enable this. And we can keep modeling. So what we're trying to do is just match the reference, and we can just do this to match it. And then for this fine detail here, we can add more edge loop and match it up. So this is what we have so far. We've started nicely for the sword. So we can move on to the next step. So for detailing the sword to kind of match the reference, what we can do is just pull this outward slightly, and selecting everything, we can just extrude it. So if you hit the slash key, you can isolate any particular object. So I'm going to select the outer edges. So what I'm trying to create now is like a sharp blade, the very sharp corners. So I'm just going to select all of that and then scale them down on the y-axis. So we have our sword blade. Okay, and so for this, for the indentation in the middle, we can just select this point. So we can select this outer region since we created like a nice topology. So we can select that outer region and hide it. So we can now select this tool. And like the next important tool you usually use for modeling is insert, and you can access that by hitting I. So in this case, it's not going to work because it's going to mess up our symmetry. But what we can also do is use the extrude and scale. So we'll scale it on the Z axis and also on the X axis. So let's check to make sure it's even. Then we extrude and scale on the Y axis since we're trying to scale in these 2 points. I'm going to add the smooth modifier and you can see what we have so far. So let's check the first face orientation because we can see we're having some artifacts. So if we check the face orientation by going to this overlay and click on face orientation, so once you see the red outwards is wrong, you want this to be blue. So we can go inside and go to mesh and go to shading, normals, flip, and it's going to flip it. Now we can uncheck the face orientation and it should look much better. So for the final touch, we can add a subdivision modifier by hitting Control, by going to the modifier and enabling the subdivision modifier, and you can see how it's looking. So furthermore, we can just make sure that all the sharp edges that we want to keep are being retained. So we'll toggle this on and off to make sure those sharp edges that we need are there. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so this is the sharp edge we definitely want to keep, and so for that we can select, just click on this edge select, okay, or we can just go ahead and add an edge loop here by hitting Ctrl R, and we need one more here, so turn this off, add another edge loop here. This will allow us to retain that sharp edge, so we also need one here. So if you're going to work if your asset is going to be rendered and used inside Blender, there are other techniques that you can use to preserve those sharp edges, except rather than adding edge loops. But I usually prefer to just add those extra edges in case the asset is going to be used in other 3D packages. So I kind of work on that, and so that can be universally applicable to other software. So that's why I prefer to add edge loops rather than just using the crease. So what I mean by crease is if I delete these edge loops and I select this particular edge, if I hit Shift E, I can create a mean crease, or the way to access that, you can enable it here, and it's going to sharpen that edge. But I just prefer to add edge loops, like I said, in case it's going to be used in another 3D package. So once we are happy, let's see if we need to sharpen any other edge. So we probably need to sharpen this edge too, so add another edge loop. So you want to just kind of go back and forth to make sure it looks as sharp as possible. So I'm quite happy with this, and we can proceed to the next part. Okay, so for the next ones, we want to create these details. So as you can see from this detail, they are quite detailed. You can see from this reference, this is a quite detailed handle. So basically what we'll be doing is kind of a mixture of base modeling, and then we'll be adding the sculpt later. So we just want to not worry about so much about this animal head, and just worry about creating all the details that we can model right now, and then we'll just create base shapes to kind of stand-in shapes to represent this, and then we can go into a sculpting package or use Blender sculpting tool to kind of create that. So for the next base shape, we want to create this one, so I can click on this and do Shift A to add another plane, rotate it 90 degrees and just scale it down slightly. So basically we'll be doing roughly the same thing. I am going to just move this into place and extrude this, okay, and extrude this. So this is what we have so far, and I don't want to model every part, I just want to model half of it. So what I'm going to do is add an empty and use that as a mirror a mirror reference point. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this mirror, okay, and then let's create the the second half of this. So I'm just going to move this forward. So I want to duplicate this, but also using the mirror modifier. So what I'm going to do is add a mirror modifier and select the mirror empty. So it's going to flip it. So you can also click on the y-axis and it's going to mirror it on the y-axis. So why it was important for me to add the mirror was because I can now move this mirror backwards to kind of make it fit into the position that I want it to fit, and it works. Okay, so next we can keep modeling and see how everything goes. So we also want to enable clipping so that we can join them as needed. So let's keep modeling. I'm going to extrude this here and start creating the curve right here. Okay, so we're looking good. Let's extrude this downwards. So if you hit Control Shift Q, Control Alt Q. So it's Control Alt Q. It's been a while since I used this. You can see this quad view. This allows you to kind of work on multiple angles, okay, and it stays in place. So this is the side view, so you can work from there and work all at once. Okay, so we have that looking good, and now we can start filling it up. So I'm going to extrude this. So if you're done, you can hit Control Alt W, Alt Q. Sorry, I keep messing up with that. So we're just gonna just do that. So you can delete this vertex and just combine this one. So select this point and hit F. So we're just working on one part, which is very convenient. Let's do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to make sure you keep it as quad as possible. That's having 4 points connecting the face. It's generally accepted as the industry standard. And there are a lot of advantages to this. This allows the subdivision modifier to work great and provides a more cleaner geometry. Because if your geometry is not clean, it tends to reflect in the shader part because it's not as smooth as it should be, and you just lose overall control the more uneven polygons you have. So like you want to avoid much triangle as much as possible. So we are almost cut there, so let's fix that. So I'm just going to select this edge and hit V to repeat. So now I'll fill this up and avoided that. So it's just going in and kind of making sure this really aligns with the reference. So like if you have noticed, it's quite easy. You just build it from ground up. The shape is not a problem. So now we've created this base shape. It's time to add more details onto it. So we could just easily select this outer, this faces, and extrude them outwards. Okay, and we can select this. If we switch to edge, we can hold down Alt and click. If you hold down Shift Alt to select multiple loops, we can do that. So what I want to do now is press Ctrl B to bevel it, to kind of retain those nice, or get those nice curved edges. But to get the best result, you want to make sure you've applied rotation and scale. Then that tends to work better that way. It's kind of the refresh feature on Windows. Just kind of refreshes everything and reinitialize all the position of the object and scales. Okay, so I'm happy with this, and I can add the subdivision modifier. And since we have a very nice looking geometry, you can see our sword is coming out looking great. So we can keep modeling, and so it's basically the same process. So let's create this inner cool part. So for that, I would just duplicate from this one that I created, like this symmetry setup, that it kind of replicates itself at the back, because it's quite convenient. And I'm just going to delete the subdivision modifier, so it doesn't distract us from what we are doing. So I am going to just select this and close this hole, so I don't have to create that again. Okay, so I'm just gonna draw this out. So for this, I will just kind of I'll just try to just fill the hole. No need for any cool topology there. I can just fix anything with edges since it's a clean geometry, and we can start all the modeling now since we've pulled it out. Okay, so now we want to kind of conform to the shape. So just extrude this and make this conform to the shape. So repeat the same thing. So I think now since this design here are going to protrude, so we want to also make room for them. We will not protrude it now. We all we want to do is kind of get the overall flow of the design, but also make room for where we are going to extrude out later. Okay, so let's just do it quickly. Also do here. Now, so we're almost done. Do one here. So by now you should have been hearing like talks like, oh, modeling is like a puzzle game, and it actually is. You just want to break everything to different steps. Try to find. It's kind of dividing your modeling into different kind of steps. So you want to find those primary shapes. Then you want to go into the secondary shapes before you go into the tertiary shapes, because if you approach it all at once, it's going to definitely feel intimidating. So this is the way I go about it to make it feel more fun, and you kind of understand shapes quickly and just see patterns in everything. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly do one for this area. So just kind of matching the reference. And extrude. Okay, so we've gotten the base form that we want, so we can go from here. So let's see the reference. This is a bit tighter, and so we can actually scale it down on the y-axis slightly. And just move them together. So like I said, it's just about playing puzzles. So now let's select those parts that we need to extrude out. So we need to extrude here, extrude here, extrude here, extrude here. Not here, so deselect that. And we also need to extrude here. You know what, let's add our own design, so we'll extrude here too. And now we can just hit E to extrude, and we'll extrude them out. So I am going to, I was trying to kind of select and do some bevel, but it seems like we have to do it like the brute force way. So I'm going to just deselect all these edges here. Like, I mean, it's cool to kind of get things procedurally sometimes, but if you really want to get into modeling as, as itself, you need to like also accept the fact that most stuff you'll be modeling cannot be procedurally generated, because if you have the mindset that you have to find like a trick to kind of model anything, it kind of limits what you can do, because there's only so much tricks that you can use to create cool stuff. And like sometimes you just really have to go in and do those dirty jobs of those monkey jobs of kind of selecting each edges as needed. And once you have that mindset, modeling will just seem so easy and fun for you. So I'm just gonna apply the rotation and scale one more time to make sure that the bevel is correct. And once I do that, voila, we have it. And since we have good topology, it should just align nicely. So we need to do some adjustment here. We're going to select this point and move that inward slightly. Select this point, move them outward slightly. Okay, so it's beginning to look good. So we can move on to the next step, which is to go ahead and fill up this face. So what I'm going to do is just select this edge loop and shift H everything, so I can just see what I want to fill up, and hit F. I'm going to turn this off for now. So let's start filling stuff up. Select this, hit F, select this, hit F. So at this point you don't want to add any extra points, so you don't mess up your topology. You just want to work with what you have. So you can just get away with like a little triangle here, and we'll fill that up. Okay. So I'm liking how it's coming out. Let's kind of see it working. I think this is a bit distracting, so I'll adjust it slightly. Yes. And also remove this edge loop here, so it's not so obvious or too distracting. Okay, so I'm quite happy the way it's looking. Let's also fix this. Okay, so we can do that by adjusting this slightly, kind of ease the tension there. Okay, so it's coming out nicely, so let's keep moving. So unhide everything. So we'll be doing this part now up to this sword area, up to this point. Okay, so for that, let's just duplicate, get one vertex from here and duplicate this, and if you hit P, you can make its own object. And of course, remove the subdivision modifier. Okay, so we can start modeling now. So extrude this, kind of match. So let's see if everything is looking good. Okay, so we can keep moving. Extrude this some more. So we want to also keep all this design that has been created. It's possible for us to do that in sculpting, but if we can kind of achieve those, we can, you know what, I'm just going to leave it for higher details. Let's just focus on getting the main details for now. So I'm going to kind of just keep, let's fill this up now. Okay, so need one more edge loop there, so fill, fill, fill. So add another edge loop here, so we fill this up. Another one here, so we fill this up. Okay, we definitely need this vertex, so we can fill this up like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we'll fill that up. So we have like a protrusion coming out from here, so let's do that. I'm going to insert this and extrude this outwards, and like we did, I'm just going to deselect this point and Ctrl B to bevel it. So we need to start making room for this circular form. So for that, what I'm going to do is going to add a cylinder, and let's reduce the vertices to like 16. So I'm bringing up this menu by going to edit, adjust last operation. I'm going to set this to nothing, so I can scale this to match the design. Okay, so we can really place it in there. So we want to have like a nice transition. So let's go to the side view. Or something like this. Okay, so we can go to the side view, and if we bring out the proportional edit and click on connect only, so you can use the middle mouse button to kind of scroll, so you can adjust it to match. So if you select anything and hold down Control click, it's going to snap on any nearby surface. So Control click if you select any point. So I'm going to disable this for now. So I'm going to select this point, control click. It's going to snap it. So that's what we want to do. We want to snap all of this. Okay, so we'll fill that up now. And let's fill this up. So like I showed you earlier, we can just select those edge loops and shift H every other thing. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Let's make sure it matches the design. So I'm gonna push this inwards. So as you can see, like really just understanding and breaking it down to different shapes makes the whole design not to be so intimidating. So I'm gonna hide this for now, and we have this shape already that we can just extrude up. I'm gonna scale it Z0, and I'm gonna add. So we want to make sure we have nice topology so that we can add edge loops and detail stuff out. Okay, we can do that. Scale Z0. And just extrude this out. So awesome. So this is how it's looking. So for this endpoints, we can just extrude it slightly and just pull it inwards so that it just retains the sharp edge. Okay, so we're almost done. Now let's go ahead and work with this. So I'm going to duplicate this because this is going to be a separate asset. Extrude it outwards and scale it up. And same thing, we can actually start doing some little sculpting, which is what we're going to use to really detail this out. But before we do that, let's just I am going to apply this symmetry for this particular object because it is very difficult to work with circles if it's if it's not symmetrical. Scale this outwards. Okay, just going to get those final details on the top, and also we'll do the same thing here. That's still, we can just extrude one of these. Sorry about that. Just trying to simplify this. For some reason this is looking really weird. I'm just going to delete that and probably just repeat the same thing that we did here. Okay. So I'm going to select this edge and push it upwards to kind of match the reference. Okay, so we'll deal with that later, but okay. So let's do this handle part. So for that I'm going to, because it's selected, and add a cube. Okay, and I will subdivide it like 3 times and apply that. And just move this upwards and just scale it down. Now we can go into the sculpt mode, and we have to have our symmetry enabled. So you can enable it through this top 2 panel here, the chef panel, or you can go to tools and go to symmetry, and then you can enable the mirror modifier, and we can just start putting things in place. So like I said, everything, even modeling, should be broken down in steps, likewise sculpting. So that's what we're basically doing here, just trying to get those initial shapes. And then we can go into a software like ZBrush and then create a more detailed sculpt. So I can actually duplicate this. So if you hit Alt S and you just scale this up, everything becomes spherical again. So I'll just scale it up. I'm going to disable the symmetry, and we can start sculpting what we want. So I think I'll enable the Y symmetry, so it's easier to work that way. Kind of just get it in shape. We're not really detailing it out yet. Okay, so we can copy the mirror modifier of this and transfer that to the other side. So for the final modeling, so basically how I copy that, it's a very powerful add-in called copy attribute add-on. So if you search for copy attributes, it comes shipped with Blender, so you can just enable that, and then you can do Ctrl+C and get all those parameters. So I'm just going to make sure it aligns nicely. So we can do the final modeling which is this part. So I'm going to duplicate this edge. So like we did before, we're just going to model this. So it's like we need to shrink this down slightly. So you can start from a plane and actually then go up to a more complex shape. So at this point, I'm just going to make sure everything aligns, and we can keep going. So now to retain the form, I'm just going to do F. Okay, move this into place. So let's add an edge loop here. So the way we'll do that is by using the bevel. Just bevel this out. Now let's close this up. So I'm going to isolate that for a bit. So we'll do some creative modeling here. Extrude this downwards. Scale it in, scale Y, scale Z, okay, and extrude. So for the final shovel and shun, we can select this edge loop and extrude it inwards, and then grab these edges and then bevel it. Let's see if we have everything selected. Also these guys here, and we can bevel them nicely. So we have our sword base that we can now go on to add more detailed sculpting on. So if you're having fun so far, I know this is a pretty long tutorial, but I thought I was going to try something longer because I can now pack a lot of educational stuff into it. So let's just adjust this point slightly. I think we need to do that. So you want to try as much as possible to make sure that your edges or the faces or the form of your geometry looks smooth, and when you add like cool materials, it just looks, it feels natural. So you can kind of test out the look of your geometry with shiny materials like this to kind of see if it's looking good. And that's some of the advantages of using polygons. I'm using quads that allows you to get this nice clean flow of shapes on your model, basically clean models, so that when you apply material or textures, everything just works. So you can use this kind of debug and see if there's any area you need to clean up or fix up the topology. So far this is looking good, so we can proceed to the detailing phase. So now the next step is to export this, or at least export areas that will be needing to sculpt on more details onto ZBrush to get like the secondary form of all those fine details. So before we do that, let's just check and make sure all the face orientation is looking great. So we need to fix this. So you can hit Shift N and it's gonna flip that, or like I showed you earlier, you can go to Mesh, Normals, and flip. Okay, so once we are happy, you can now go ahead and export this mesh onto to a FBX or an OBJ file that you can import to ZBrush. But I have a very awesome free add-on which allows me to just import or export geometry from Blender straight into ZBrush. So I can quickly do that by just selecting any of the mesh that I want to export. So that's everything. I would just hit export, and the add-on is quite smart enough to just open ZBrush, and it's quite robust. As if you're a Blender user that work with ZBrush, this is a tool you definitely want to check out. Okay, so once you have it opened up, you can drag it out in your scene. Jump into edit mode, and it's, I don't know, for some reason it imports with this cube, so we can just delete this cube, and this is the sword we have, and we can start working with it. So we want to first start sculpting out this detail here. So let's do that. I'm going to enable symmetry for now, but I don't want to work on the X symmetry. Or you know what, I just want to work on one part, then I can mirror it later. So to do that, I'm going to just select one part and group mask and hide it, and then I can do delete hidden, so I can just work on just this one part. So we'll have to fix this later. It should not be much trouble. Okay, so for this one part, I want to work on the Y or the Z axis. So I'm going to go to transform, and let's see if I can locate it. So if I enable symmetry, I want to set it to the Y axis. Sorry, Z axis, because it's different from Blender. Okay, so we can work on one part and you transfer the information to the other. Okay, and I'm going to use Dynamesh because it allows me to work with lots of details. So before that, I'll just remesh it and then Dynamesh it. So I'm going to increase the resolution to like 300 to be a good start. We need something higher, 600. Okay, so we can start working. I'll just grab my pen. So obviously from the reference we can see we're trying to create a creature. So like I said, it's creating any asset in 3D is just basically about breaking it down to steps, and if you break it down to step, it makes a lot of sense that way, because if you just jump right into it, it becomes quite, or it feels quite intimidating. So I'm just going to break it down to step, and the step which I'm going to be using is kind of getting the main forms of everything I want to be in place. The reference is not so clear on the character because it's just an image I got from Google, but I will take some creative liberty, but I'll still be trying to retain the spirit of the concept. So we need more geometry. I can subdivide for now. Just trace out what I'm just trying to do now is just get the overall feel of the asset, of the concept. A lot of subdivision, so I will just apply this subdivision. Where's that? delete lower. Okay, so I can work with this, and I'm not really worried about the details because of I will not be retopologizing it. I will just in the sense of the traditional way of kind of going in and using polygon to do that. What I'll be doing instead is just using the zero mesher that can just allow you to get a decent looking topology. I think that will be great for stuff like this. So what's important is just to get the overall feeling of this asset. And it's important to just kind of sculpt all the details in one geometry, since it's more like a sculpture rather than a character. Okay, so let's do the jaw. By the way, like I mentioned when the tutorial started, this asset will be free. I'll just keep a link, put a link out on Gumroad so that you can check it out for yourself. And if you're interested in using it, you can use it for free. So we have like a beard here. We'll just fill this up. Other reason I prefer to use ZBrush for sculpting, it's not really the tools, it's just my muscle memory is quite great with ZBrush, and like my pen tends to work much better with ZBrush than Blender. So I usually just use Blender for poly modeling, and then use ZBrush for sculpting more organic shapes, or just concepting out an asset that I will later retopologize, or just like in this case just zero mesh it. So I'm just looking for the overall form, like I said, not really going in for the main details, because for that I feel I'm just gonna waste my time if I do it right now. So my plan is to kind of get this form and then UV unwrap this. I can now UV unwrap it, and once I UV unwrap it, then I can now sculpt in those scales and other stuff, and just bake it down or bake it out to be used as normal map and displacement map. So I can get away without not worrying about too much details, because it's just a sculpture, and I see this is just the first pass for this particular asset. So just get it looking good enough, and then I can get a cleaner version of the mesh that we can now use for other part of production of the pipeline. Okay, just So at this point, this asset will definitely be a real-time asset. That's the goal. So the textures will be PBR textures. But for the poly count, which is something you should start considering now, so you can work, kind of plan for the topology for the final stuff, and also how much details can you keep or transform, because it's usually very helpful if the overall shape or form of the character or the asset kind of retains some of the details, and that's determined by the amount of topology you have to use. So in this case, I can just go wild, or not, but not too crazy. So I can just have enough topology that can show the information of, or pass the information of the final look. So this is how it's gonna look for now, and I can detail it out later. So let me just play with the forms some more. Okay, so at this point I'm quite happy with it, and I can move on to the other parts that I need to detail. So for this, what I'm going to do is zero mesh it for now. So for the zero mesh, let's enable face mode. I can disable the Dynamesh and just zero mesh it with the default setting. Let's see if we need to undo that. And so I like this, it's looking good, but it's currently quite lot, so I can now switch this to half and zero mesh it some more to get less polygons. Okay, so now I'm just gonna play with the overall shape now that I have a more cleaner geometry. The more tertiary details can be added later using a higher res of this model, but for now, like I said, it's just important to get the details. I can add those back later. Okay, so I'm going to mirror this now. So where is it? Okay, so it's mirrored nicely, so we have that looking good. So I'm just gonna save this file. It's quite high, but it's okay. So we also want to I would like to mirror it on the y-axis too, but let's see. Okay, let's just start sculpting. I can just work on half and then mirror it back later. So just reduce this slightly so I can get the form. So like I said, it's just you don't worry about the overall form. You just want to get you don't worry about the little details. You just want to worry about getting the overall form to look and feel like you want. For this, I'm going to group mask and hide this, delete hidden, so we just work on half like half of it. So what we're trying to do now is just get the main shape. And like the nice volume here. I think we have it going to the back area, kind of wraps around like a hand. Now I can go in and start detailing it some more, put in some distinction between other necessary detail. You're just trying to make it feel like a sculpture. Going to extend this slightly so we have room for more details. Okay, great. Dynamics this again. So let's start creating room for this part. So for this, I'm just gonna hide the parts I don't need and draw a mask. Okay, now grab the move tool and extrude this outwards. So we have that now. So make room for more designs. So it's just breaking it down to step-by-step process. Then it starts to make sense. Smooth out everything. So let's start getting some sharp edges, which is needed based off the design. Going to achieve that using the flatten brush. Okay, so for the skull inside, what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to add this sphere, which I'm going to sculpt on, and then just combine everything. Okay, so for that I'm just going to add a sphere object, like you guessed. Just scale this down. So currently you can see the rest object is marked, so it makes it easy for me to just move this into place and get the shapes which I want. So I'll just get the overall shape and feel, then I will combine everything. So you can dynamesh your stuff with there's this grid divide, so I'm just gonna use that. So it allows you to just grid divide it, like so adding subdivision, which is quite helpful here. So let's create a nice quick skull. Probably grid divide it some more. And let's try to match the concept more closely. And finally we can work on the mount. Just add like a fang, make it look cool. Okay, so we need more resolutions. I'm gonna increase this to about 2000. Awesome. So I can now combine them nicely, and let's just polish it. So like I was thinking, for some of the shapes that are pretty geometrical and will be difficult to like get it just using organic sculpting techniques. So I'm just going to actually model some more details that are needed for this. But for the rest, I'll just sculpt it. So those details that I'm referring to that I can model right now is um, this nice indentations or protrusions. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just a freehand. Have one coming here. Okay, so which also here. And then I'm going to scale that up, which I will better do inflate. Does that better, or deflate? Okay, I think I did it a bit too much, so let me use values. So I'm gonna do inflate point 0.8. Okay, this looks good. So for the rest details, I can just model it in and to bring it all together. So let's just sharpen these details before we remesh it. Make this call look a bit intimidating. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's fine. Now I'm going to zero mesh it. Oh, let's see if I can just duplicate it now before I zero mesh it. Remesh it. Sorry. So if you hold on Control, you can duplicate it and rotate on the y-axis. So have something like this. Now I can dynamesh it one more time, so it combines the two geometry. And just for, let's see if I need to do any extra work with it, use the flattening brush to fill in this gaps. Okay, so we're good. We can zero mesh it now. So this will be a bit more dense than the previous one. So disable the dynamesh. That's not really important, but so the zero mesh. Okay, so it's done zero meshing. Let's see. So it's looking good. We can do it one more time, but this time we'll set it to half. Kind of lost a bit of details, so we'll probably leave it like this. Or you know what? I'm just gonna add in these details later, so I can just remesh it to the lowest value. Kind of gotten the shape and what I intend to do. Okay, so I'm quite happy with this, and we can move on to the next step, which is this. So before that, let's just export the ones that we're happy with, and we can now build on from what we have so far. So let's get back into Blender. I can just import it, and it does a great job just smoothly transferring all those details into Blender. So let's do this again. So, okay. So this is what we have so far, and we can now UV unwrap stuff, add more details, and just take it to that last step. But before that, I want to move this up slightly. Do some editing here, so I'm gonna select all of these, just move it upwards. And then use the sculpt brush in Blender, and to do that I think I have to apply it, but better still, I'll put the cursor here and origin, Shift S, origin to 3D cursor, because Blender symmetry works based on the origin. Where's that? Shift S, origin to 3D cursor. I can cursor to okay, I found it. So you have to click on the object context menu and origin to 3D cursor, and now when we sculpt, the symmetry is correct. So we also want to enable on the Z axis. Okay, so just to get back that circular shape. Okay, cool. So now the next step is kind of add the final details. Then we can go ahead and kind of retopologize everything. So I'm gonna add a plane, scale it on the x-axis and just place it. Add a bit of subdivision. So if you hold on Control click, it's going to just snap onto the surface. Then I'm going to extrude it, scale it Y 90 degrees. So we have that there. Scale it slightly. Do the same thing, just duplicate this. You know what? Okay, so before I extrude it, I'm just gonna duplicate it and just paste it onto the surface. Then I can extrude it later. So duplicate, hold Control and G is going to just snap it on the surface. and I will do just 2 more. Okay, so let's do them all together so it's all snaps. I can now extrude this, scale Y 90 degrees. Going to also bevel them, so I can quickly just bevel all of them by using bevel modifier. That's right, I don't want to go ahead and select everything, so I will use the bevel modifier to achieve that and just set it to angle. Okay, just adjust as much as I need and I can apply it. Now what I'm gonna do is just duplicate and kind of position it to match the concept art, to match the reference image that we're working from. Okay, so it's looking good for now. I think it will make sense once they all have one material and everything going to look good. So we can just easily use the mirror empty as a reference to just quickly mirror this on. I'm going to scale it on the Y axis to be a bit flatter and just move it in. I really don't know how you guys would take this very long tutorial, but just shooting my shot. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Did I like it with the symmetry? Kind of do. Looks cool. Okay, so for the nice final design that we can do, right? We can do, actually we can still do a couple. So I'm gonna create a curve, a Bezier curve. So for the hair protruding, I'm gonna set this to automatic and hide all the handles. I usually don't like to work with it. Snap onto face and then set it in front, so I can just focus on the artistic process and just extrude this to be the hair. So before I continue, I will preview the depth of the curves just to make sure it looks as I want, and I'm happy with this, and we can just work from here. And all we just need to do is just extrude and scale this down. So if you hit Alt S, you can scale it. That's going to make it overlap on each other. Extrude a couple of more. So you can just play music. I would have even gone more crazy if I was not time conscious, but kind of get the vibe of what's going here. I like this. You know what, I'll just settle for using this hair to create a very cool effect and just call it done for the detailing process of this. Almost done. So let me know in the comments if you like this format of tutorial, something new that I'm trying. very long form tutorial where like I just show you everything I do. Oh, really cool. So I'm gonna disable the in front and we can see what we really have. So X symmetry without. I think with this X symmetry even looks cool, so I'm gonna leave it on. We can play with the depth. Now what, it was perfect earlier, so I'm just gonna leave this as it is. So since geometry is also a concern, you can play with how much resolutions you want. I'm gonna leave this at 2. Also gonna reduce the resolution of the curve itself so it's not so dense, since this is an asset that we can use for probably games or real-time animation. You want to be conscious about that, and we can go ahead and convert this into a mesh. So this is how it's looking so far. I'm really liking how it's coming on. For the handles, for this this point where the character is gonna hold, we have like a rope going around it. We can actually get a detailed rope, which kind of I would just do that with textures. We've kind of spent a lot of time. We can actually do it very easily with curves, but it's okay. We'll just leave that for, we'll just use textures to achieve that. So let's kind of preview how everything is looking now. It's a pretty cool sword. And as subdivision, it looks cool. So you want to make sure that all your assets are able to work with subdivisions, kind of enhance the look. And for you to get to that level is, of course, you have to be conscious about your topology and geometry. Okay, so we can move on to the next stage, which is UV wrapping and texturing and adding more details. So finally, this is the result. So this is the original concept at which we're working from, and this is the result which we are ending with. I had gone ahead to kind of texture and add all the details behind the scene because it was going to take longer than I expected, and I didn't want to make the video too part. So this is the final look of the asset. As you can see, it's quite detailed, and it's one object and it's using one texture, but it's a PBR texture. So like I said, this asset will be available for you guys to download it. I hope you guys kind of picked up one thing or two from this very long video. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, and if you wish to see more from me, please give this video please subscribe to this channel. So bye bye for now, see you next time.